Before we begin tonight's story, I want you to do something for me. Turn off the lights, put your phone face down, and listen. Because what you're about to hear isn't a legend or a campfire tale. It's a confession from a man who should have never come back from the dead. He was part of a unit that didn't officially exist. Soldiers who cleaned up the kind of mess no one's supposed to know about. They called themselves Phantom Echo. But when they were sent into an abandoned research facility known only as the Doghouse, they didn't find weapons or terrorists or anything human. They found something that learned and remembered. This story was found in a series of encrypted audio files buried in a classified military archive. What you're about to hear is the last transmission from Phantom Echo. And if you start hearing the hum by the time we reach the end, don't worry. It's probably nothing. I don't tell this story to scare you. I tell it because I need someone to believe me. People assume that war changes you. They're wrong. War doesn't change you. It shows you what you already were. If you had fear inside you, it tears it open. If you had rage, it feeds it, until that's all that's left. I've seen people torn apart in alleys, their mouths still open in prayer. I've pulled children out of burning homes before the rest of the world could blink. I've been shot at, bombed, hunted through mountains, and dragged through the mud in places where diplomacy meant nothing. I thought I'd seen everything a man could do to another man. But I was wrong. When you spend enough time in the field, the noise in your head never really goes away. It's always there, a hum, a vibration that reminds you you've seen too much. I learned to live with that hum. I learned to trust it. That's probably why they chose me. They said it was an elite reassignment, a team with no insignia, no records, no official name. Off the books, off the grid. We were only ever called Phantom Echo. You won't find us in any database, and that's not paranoia. That's policy. We weren't Navy. We weren't Rangers. We weren't Delta. We were what they sent when every normal solution had failed. When I joined, I was told only one thing. You don't exist. You just fix what no one else can see. And for 3 years, I believed that was all there was. Dangerous operations, classified objectives, plausible deniability. Until the night we were sent to the Doghouse. I still dream about that place. Sometimes I wake up thinking I can smell it again. That sharp chemical rot that clings to your throat like acid. When that smell comes back, I know sleep won't find me for days. It started with a briefing inside a hangar, just outside Quantico. The handler, a woman we only knew as Monarch, didn't make eye contact. She never did. She just clicked the projector, and grainy satellite photos filled the wall. 2 missing deputies in a small rural county up north. No signal, no trace, no backup. 10 more officers sent in afterward, same result. No bodies, no distress calls, just silence. Normally that would have been a local jurisdiction problem. But 2 of those officers had personal ties to our team. One had served with Ruth before retiring, another trained under Nolan years ago. That's what made us push back. We told command we had enough cause to go in. They resisted, of course, all the usual talk about jurisdiction and optics. But we kept pressing until the order came down. Go in quiet. Observe. Report. Get out. Nothing about rescue. Nothing about engagement. Just observe. We knew what that meant. Something had gone wrong. Something big enough that they didn't want eyes on it, not even their own. That's when I should have walked away. But soldiers like me We don't walk away. We follow orders, even when those orders lead straight into hell. They called us Phantom Echo because we were never supposed to leave a trace. No footprints, no paper trail, not even a whisper of acknowledgement when things went wrong. Our squad was small, 6 of us in total. Ruth, my second in command, was quiet and methodical, the kind of soldier who could walk through chaos and make it look rehearsed. Santos was the youngest, barely 25, but sharp with a rifle and even sharper with his mouth. Nolan, our breacher, had hands like iron and a temper to match. Then there were Marks and Webb, the twins, not by blood, but by the way they moved. Always synchronized, always finishing each other's sentences. And then there was me, the one who'd seen too much and still volunteered for more. We met at the staging point 2 days after the briefing. The orders were simple enough on paper. A defunct animal testing facility shut down over a decade ago. The locals called it the doghouse. It had been scheduled for demolition twice, but somehow never got around to it. They said the funding disappeared, the paperwork got lost, and eventually, people just stopped caring. But somebody out there hadn't stopped caring. The locals started reporting lights at night, movement behind broken windows, the sound of metal grinding when there was no power to the building. The sheriff's department had brushed it off until 2 deputies didn't come home. When they sent in 10 more and they vanished too, the state troopers stepped in, but they never made it to the site. Their vehicles were found abandoned along the access road, doors open, radios dead. That was when our handler's tone changed. No longer a rural mystery. Now it was national concern. Code word containment breach. She didn't elaborate. She never did. Just handed us our assignment packets, sealed in black envelopes stamped with red tape. Each one bore the same line of text: observation mission. Directive Echo 9A, clearance level 7. No external communication authorized. We knew what that meant: total blackout. No backup. No extraction unless they initiated it. By the time we boarded our transport, a matte black Suburban with no plates, the air already felt heavier. The drive north was silent, except for the static hum of the encrypted radio link. Ruth sat across from me, checking his gear in the low light. He caught me watching and asked quietly, "You think it's another biochem job?" I shook my head. If it was, we'd be in hazmat suits, not tactical gear. Santos snorted from the back. Maybe it's another black lab gone rogue. Heard they were running tests on primates up here before it got shut down. Enough, Ruth said, his voice calm but sharp. Stick to the plan. No speculation until we see it ourselves. That was Ruth, always the anchor. But as the forest grew thicker outside, something began to change. The road narrowed into a single lane, surrounded by trees, older than the town itself. Mist clung to the ground, like it was alive, swirling around the tires in lazy circles. The headlights barely cut through it. I glanced at the GPS mounted on the dashboard. The signal flickered, then vanished entirely. A few seconds later, the radio clicked, twice, then went dead. No one spoke for a long time after that. When we finally reached the access road, the fog had thickened into a wall. It looked like the forest itself didn't want us there. 3 abandoned police cruisers sat across the lot, half buried in weeds, one of them still flashing a faint red strobe from its rear light. The pulse of it painted the mist in blood. We parked behind them, engines off, no headlights. I gave the signal. Spectre 1, dismount. Doors opened in unison, soft and deliberate. Our boots crunched against the gravel, the sound muffled by the fog. The building loomed ahead, 3 stories tall, grey cement windows shattered or boarded shut. A rusted loading dock door was chained, but the chain had already been cut. Bolt cutters lay nearby, their blades stained dark. I ran my hand along the doorframe. Cold metal. Too cold for the season. Someone's been here recently, I said. Ruth nodded. Then they're either gone or still inside. No one laughed. No one argued. We just formed up rifles, raised and advanced toward the doghouse. I should have known then. The silence wasn't empty. It was listening. The fog hung so thick it looked alive. It drifted between us like slow breath, swallowing the beam of our flashlights before it reached the ground. Every step forward made the silence heavier. The doghouse wasn't just abandoned, it felt forgotten. The paint had peeled off in long curling strips. Windows were black with mildew. The air smelled like wet metal and something older, something that shouldn't have lingered this long. We moved in 2 files, splitting around the main loading dock. Ruth and I took the front approach, the others circled around back. The double-wide security doors stood half open, one panel, bent at the hinges, as if forced outward from the inside. That should have been our first clue. I raised a closed fist, held it for 2 seconds, then dropped it forward. The signal. We went in low rifles, drawn beams slicing through the dark. The air inside was thick stale. It hit me like walking into a sealed tomb. Dust hung in the air, drifting through the light. Spectre 1 clear left, Spectre 2 clear right. We spoke only in clipped whispers. Every sound was a violation. The lobby had been stripped bare, no desks, no chairs, just a few rusted filing cabinets tipped on their sides. The walls were stained in vertical streaks where water had run down from the ceiling. A single fluorescent tube above us flickered every few seconds, humming like a dying insect. The building wasn't dead. It was sleeping. We moved deeper. The sound of our boots echoed across the empty hallways, too loud, too human. Somewhere beyond the next door, I thought I heard something faint. A rhythmic tap. Metal against tile. I froze, hand up. Everyone stopped instantly. We waited. Nothing. Maybe it was a pipe settling. Maybe the building was breathing. I told myself that because I needed to. We cleared the first floor room by room. Desks overturned, paperwork still sitting in trays like someone had stepped out for lunch and never came back. A coffee mug lay on its side near the sink, the stain on the floor beneath it shaped like a handprint. That detail shouldn't have bothered me, but it did. Spectre 1 to all units, I whispered into my mic. First floor clear, proceeding north corridor. Clicks of acknowledgement came through the comms. No static yet. That would come later. We reached a junction, a long hallway stretching deeper into the building lights, dead beyond the first 10 meters. The beam from my flashlight caught a smear along the wall, a dark rust-colored streak that ran down to the floor. It wasn't fresh, but it wasn't old either. Ruth crouched, brushed a finger through it, brought it close to his visor. Blood, he murmured. Not dried out yet. We followed the trail to a side corridor, narrower than the rest. The tiles underfoot were cracked, and the air grew colder with every step. At the end was a metal hatch embedded into the floor, half covered by fallen shelving. The chain that once locked it shut hung broken. Santos moved forward, knelt beside it. His light revealed gouges along the edges, deep, uneven marks. Something pulled this open, he said, from below. A chill ran through me. Not fear, not yet, just instinct. That same vibration in my head that had saved my life more times than I could count. Stack up, I ordered. 2 and 3 on breach, 4 and 6 perimeter. We cleared the debris, and the hatch lifted with a groan that scraped the silence raw. A smell rolled out wet chemical with a bitter undertone of decay. I'd smelled it once before in a biolab fire outside Kandahar. Rot and disinfectant. Death pretending to be clean. We dropped a chem light into the hole. It fell a long way before clinking against concrete. The glow barely reached the bottom, but enough to show the start of a ladder bolted into the wall. Basement access, Ruth said quietly. He didn't ask if we were going down. He already knew the answer. I took one last look at the corridor behind us. The light at the far end flickered, once then went out completely. Spectre 1 descending, I said into the comms. Then I climbed down into the dark. The rungs of the ladder were slick with moisture. Each one moaned as my boots met the metal echoing upward, until it disappeared into the dark above me. The deeper I went, the colder the air became. It wasn't the kind of cold that made you shiver. It was the kind that clung pressing against your skin until you could taste it. By the time my boots hit the floor, the light from above was nothing but a pale circle. Ruth dropped down behind me, landing silent. The others followed one by one. When the last of them reached the bottom, the hatch above closed with a dull thud. The sound of the world sealed away. I turned my flashlight forward. The beam cut through a long corridor lined with cracked green tiles. Old surgical panels, the kind used in laboratories, sterile, easy to clean. Except nothing about this place felt clean. Every few meters, there was a drain set into the floor. Rust had spread around them like rot on flesh. I could smell the metallic sting of disinfectant. Beneath something else, a sickly sweet rot, faint but present. We moved in pairs, covering each other's angles. The hum of electricity pulsed through the walls, weak, irregular, like a dying heart. Someone somewhere had left the power on. At the first junction, we found the remains of an old sign bolted to the wall. Half the letters had peeled away, but you could still make out one word: laboratory. Ruth glanced at me. Thought this place was animal testing. I nodded. That's what they said. I wasn't sure who they was anymore. We passed door after door, most sealed, others broken open from the inside. The rooms behind them were filled with toppled equipment cages, stacked in rows, some twisted open. One still had a rusted tag hanging from it. Specimen 11B. I didn't want to think about what had been inside. The further we went, the worse it got. There were marks along the walls, gouges deep enough to expose the concrete beneath. Some were vertical, like something had been dragged. Others were clustered near the floor, shaped like handprints, but wrong, too long, too thin. Santos stopped suddenly. Movement, he whispered. All lights swung forward at once. The beam landed on a shape hunched near the corner, a human outline half collapsed against the wall. I raised my rifle, heart pounding. Hold position, I ordered, moving closer. The figure didn't move. When I reached it, the smell hit first. It was a person, or what was left, of one sitting upright head, tilted back, mouth open, in a silent scream. The skin was grey, brittle eyes, hollow. The throat had been torn open, not cut, torn, like something had reached in and pulled outward. Ruth crouched beside it, swallowing hard. That's a uniform. Sheriff's Department. Looks like one of the first responders, I said. He nodded slowly. What the hell did this? No one answered. We continued. Every step forward, made the corridor feel tighter, the ceiling lower. The hum of the lights above us started to waver, flickering between pulses. Somewhere ahead, something dripped slow, rhythmic like water. We reached a turn. The floor here sloped slightly downward. That's when the smell intensified, sharper, heavier, almost oily. The kind of scent that makes the back of your throat burn. Marks covered his nose. Smells like chemicals. Or bodies, Nolan muttered. We followed the corridor until it opened into a wider chamber. The air was damp, the sound echoing oddly off the walls. My light swept across the floor and caught a line of dark stains leading toward a door at the far end. The door was metal, heavy and closed. A viewing panel sat in the center, fogged from the inside. Ruth pressed his hand against it. There's something on the other side. I stepped closer. Through the thin layer of condensation, I could almost see movement, a shadow shifting in the dim light beyond. Not fast, not human. The hum of the ceiling lights stuttered again, then steadied. I could feel the others behind me tense, waiting. I turned back to them and spoke quietly. Form up, we clear it together. Ruth nodded, checking his rifle. Santos moved to the handle. His hand hovered there for a moment. You ready? I asked. He didn't answer. He just pulled. The door swung open with a screech that ripped through the silence. The smell hit us like a wave, not rot, not death, something in between. The room beyond was large tiled, like a morgue, and the lights inside buzzed with uneven life. For a moment, I thought it was empty, until I saw what hung from the ceiling. Dozens of shapes, bodies, and for the first time in a long time, I felt fear, real paralyzing fear. I've seen death before. Too much of it, but not like this. They weren't just dead, they'd been arranged. 12 bodies, maybe more strung up from the ceiling by cords of their own flesh. Veins stretched like ropes, tendons pulled from arms and threaded through the rafters in perfect, deliberate patterns. One man had been split open from wrist to elbow, the skin folded back like pages of a book. Another hung upside down, the back of his legs, peeled open muscles, carved into ribbons that glistened under the fluorescent buzz. Every one of them had been positioned with precision. No chaos, no frenzy. It looked like someone or something had been studying. Santos gagged behind me. Jesus Christ. Ruth's voice was tight steady, only because he forced it to be. These are the missing deputies. I nodded slowly, and maybe some of the state troopers. The air was heavy, a mix of blood gone stale and something chemical. It clung to the back of my tongue, sharp and metallic. I could almost taste the fear in it. I took a few steps forward, scanning the room. No sign of gunfire, no struggle. Whoever did this, they didn't fight back, or they never got the chance. Spectre 1 to all teams, I said quietly into my mic. We've located the officers. They're deceased. Mutilation is severe. Intentional positioning. This is a kill site. Before I could finish the next word, the comms exploded with static, and then screaming. Contact gunfire tore through the radio feed. Automatic bursts overlapping voices. Someone shouting, "Movement, movement," before the line went dead. I spun toward Ruth. Red team. He shook his head. No response. Blue team came through, next voices fractured by interference. Shots fired. Multiple contacts can't see. Then nothing. Just static. Something cold slid down my spine. Whatever had killed those men wasn't gone. It was still here. Fall back, I ordered. Regroup at Junction 2. Move. We backed out of the chamber rifles, up scanning every corner. The light flickered once, twice, then all at once, the corridor ahead went black. Only our flashlights cut the dark now. The beam caught condensation forming on the walls, streaks of moisture crawling like veins. The air thickened, pressing against our chests. Santos whispered, "It's getting hotter." He was right. The temperature had shifted, but the air felt damp, alive, like breathing through someone else's lungs. We moved quickly, the silence between us louder than any scream. When we rounded the first corner, I saw two silhouettes moving toward us. Blue team. Their lights were shaking beams, bouncing off the walls. Status Y called out. Negative contact visual 1 shouted. We heard gunfire, then lights out. Red team's gone. We can't find. He stopped mid-sentence. The other soldier's beam had landed on something just ahead. At first I thought it was another hanging body, but then it moved. Slowly, deliberately. It stepped forward into the light, tall enough to brush the pipes along the ceiling, its body hunched but sinewy. The surface of its skin rippled like wet fabric stretched too tight. There was no face, just a smooth expanse of flesh that trembled as if something underneath was trying to get out. Then came the sound, not a growl, not a scream. Something between a wet gasp and a whisper crawling down the hall like it was alive. Ruth's voice broke the spell. Contact front. The corridor erupted in gunfire. Rounds tore into the thing's torso, splattering dark fluid against the tiles. It staggered, but it didn't fall. It twisted. Bones, or something like bones, shifted under its skin. The mass of its body split open, revealing arms where there shouldn't be any. They uncoiled, slick and glistening, each tipped with something sharp and metallic. Santos screamed as one of those arms lashed forward, too fast to see. It struck him across the chest, slicing through armor like paper. He went down hard, gasping, clutching at the wound. The lights flickered again, and this time half of them went out for good. The only illumination came from muzzle flashes and the dim green of our night optics. Something hit the ceiling. We looked up just as a mass of glistening tendrils began to crawl out of the vents, moving like veins searching for a pulse. They dropped. I fired until the rifle clicked dry. Ruth grabbed Santos by the vest, dragging him back, shouting over the chaos. Fall back. Fall back. We ran. The sound behind us wasn't footsteps. It was the slick drag of flesh on tile. Something heavy, pulling itself along the walls. As we turned the corner, I looked back and for a second under the stuttering light, I saw it. Not a monster. Not an animal. A shape. Human once maybe, but hollowed out, rebuilt from its own anatomy. And somewhere deep inside the sound of its movement, I swear I heard something else. A voice, soft like a breath against my ear. It whispered just one word. Stay. We ran blind. Boots slamming against concrete, the sound of our breathing, tangled with the echoes of gunfire and that awful wet dragging noise behind us. Every corner looked the same grey tile, flickering lights, rust-stained drains. But something about the place had changed. The halls felt longer, stretching in ways they hadn't before. It was like the building itself was shifting, closing in on us. Ruth was in front of me, half dragging Santos, who was bleeding through his armor. Blue team was just behind, or what was left of them. I heard one of them shouting into the comms, but the words dissolved into static. Then one by one, the gunfire stopped. At first, I thought they were reloading. Then I heard a scream short, sharp, cut off halfway. The corridor filled with the sound of something heavy hitting the floor. then silence. I spun around. The beam of my flashlight swept the dark, but the hallway was empty. Blue team was gone. Just gone. Santos, keep moving, Ruth shouted. His voice cracked under the strain. We took the next left, pushing through a set of double doors that led into what looked like an exam room. The air inside was colder. My breath came out in short clouds. Tables overturned, a single light flickering from above. Everything smelled like ammonia and blood. We shoved one of the metal cabinets against the door. The screech of it on the dial echoed down the hall. Then there was nothing, only the sound of our own breathing. Santos lay on the floor, pale shaking. I ripped open a med pack, pressing gauze into the wound across his chest. It didn't matter. The bleeding wasn't normal. His veins had turned dark, almost black, and his pulse was racing faster than a human heart should. Ruth crouched beside him. We need evac. Now. I shook my head. We're dark. No comms, no GPS. No one's coming. Santos tried to speak, but only blood came out. Then his body jerked once, twice, before going still. We froze. Then the movement started again, but slower this time. His fingers twitched. Then his jaw began to move. It wasn't breathing. It was mimicking. I backed away. Ruth's voice dropped to a whisper. What the hell is happening to him? The sound that came out of Santos's mouth wasn't human. It was a wet click, like a broken radio picking up a heartbeat. Then slowly, his head turned toward me, but the eyes weren't his anymore. Something moved behind them. Move, I shouted. Ruth didn't hesitate. He raised his rifle and fired. The report was deafening in the small room. Santos's body dropped, instantly twitching once before going still for good. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then we heard it, a slow scrape outside the door. Metal against tile, followed by the unmistakable rhythm of footsteps. One step, pause, another, getting closer. Ruth pressed his ear to the door. His voice was barely a breath. It's right outside. We held our breath, rifles aimed at the door. The handle trembled once, but didn't turn. Then the sound changed soft, dragging like skin sliding along the wall. It stopped directly in front of us. We stood frozen, counting the seconds in silence. 10, 20, 30. Then, as suddenly as it came, the sound moved away, the footsteps fading down the hall until there was nothing left. Ruth exhaled shakily. We can't stay here. He was right. But the thought of going back into those corridors made my stomach twist. Still, we didn't have a choice. We moved the cabinet, pushed through the doors, and stepped back into the hallway. The air was thicker now. The lights overhead were dimming one by one, as if something was feeding on the power. Ruth took point, his rifle steady, but his hands trembling. We turned a corner, and there it was again. The shape, far down the corridor, motionless, its head tilted just enough for the light to catch on the slick surface of its skin. It looked like it was watching us, though there were no eyes to see with. Ruth aimed. On your mark. But before I could speak, it moved. Not forward, not back, up. It crawled along the wall, then the ceiling limbs bending in ways no bones should allow. The lights flickered wildly as it passed, and the air filled with a low humming sound that vibrated in my teeth. We opened fire. Rounds tore through the dark, hitting flesh, or something like it. But the thing didn't fall. It dropped behind us instead. The sound it made when it landed was like meat hitting stone. I turned just in time to see one of its arms whip toward Ruth. He dove aside, barely missing it, the appendage slicing through the wall like a blade. Chunks of tile exploded outward. "Run!" I yelled. We sprinted down the hall, every step echoing like gunshots. The thing followed, not fast, but inevitable, like it knew we couldn't outrun it. When we reached the junction, Ruth stopped. There, he pointed to a small room ahead, a storage closet door half open. We dove inside, slammed the door, and locked it. Then, in the dim red glow of the emergency light, we stood there, shoulder to shoulder, backs pressed against cold steel, and listened. For a moment, all was quiet. Then came the breathing. Not ours. It was on the other side of the door. The sound on the other side of the door wasn't random. It had rhythm, intent. A slow scrape, then a pause, then another, like it wanted us to know it was still there. I pressed my back harder into the steel, feeling every vibration as it dragged its claws or whatever it used across the frame. Ruth met my eyes in the dark lips, barely moving. "It knows we're here." I nodded once. I didn't dare speak. The red emergency light outside the closet leaked in under the door, a thin glowing line that looked like blood in motion. Something shifted past it, casting a shadow that moved in fragments, like the body behind it wasn't made right. Then came the breathing. It wasn't deep or steady. It was wet, full of liquid and strain, like someone trying to inhale through broken lungs. We stayed that way for what felt like forever. I counted my heartbeats, one after another, until the rhythm outside started matching mine. That's when I realized it was listening. Ruth's hand brushed against my shoulder, trembling. He leaned close enough that I could feel the heat of his breath. "We can't stay in here," he whispered. "It's waiting for us to panic." He was right. The longer we stayed, the smaller the room felt. The air grew thicker, heavy with sweat, and the metallic taste of fear. I swallowed hard, my voice low. "If we move, it'll hear us." "It already does," Ruth said. "It's playing with us." The scratching stopped. Silence. The kind that makes your skin crawl because you know silence doesn't mean safety. Then something wet hit the floor outside, like a drop of thick fluid landing in a puddle. Another, then another. Drip, drip. Each one heavier than the last. Ruth's jaw clenched. He unhooked a flashbang from his vest. "If I throw this far enough down the hall, maybe it'll follow the sound." "No." I grabbed his arm. "You won't make it back." He met my eyes. For a moment, I saw something I hadn't seen in him since before the war peace. "I've got to try," he said. "If I don't, we both die in here." He waited, listening to the thing breathe. When it shifted again, he moved. He cracked the door just enough to slip through, flashbang in one hand, rifle in the other. The door closed behind him without a sound. I crouched low, pressing my ear to the metal, every nerve in my body screaming to run, but unable to move. 3 seconds. 4. Then a blinding white light flared through the bottom of the door, followed by a concussive pop that rattled the hinges. Then silence. For half a second, I thought maybe it had worked. Maybe Ruth had drawn it away. Then I heard the scream. It wasn't his. At first, it was its. A guttural, piercing howl that shook the walls. It sounded like every human voice I'd ever heard, twisted together and played backward. Then came Ruth's voice, raw, panicked, fading fast. "Go, get something slammed against the wall outside, hard enough to make the steel bend inward." The noise that followed was indescribable bones breaking flesh, tearing, then a wet, dragging sound. And then nothing. I covered my mouth with both hands. I wanted to scream, but I couldn't. The air felt thick with the weight of what had just happened. Minutes passed, or hours, I couldn't tell. Eventually, the sound returned softer, now slower. Footsteps again, back and forth. It had come back. The handle of the door twitched once, then stilled. And in that silence, it breathed. Long, steady, patient. It knew I was the only one left. When it finally moved away, I didn't follow. I stayed there back against the wall, rifle across my lap, waiting for the courage to do something other than breathe. At some point, I must have blacked out shock or exhaustion. I don't know. But when I opened my eyes, the red light was gone. Only darkness. The hum of the lights had stopped, the power finally dead. I stood slowly, body aching, and opened the door. The hallway outside was empty. No blood, no body, no sign of Ruth. Only his helmet lying on its side near the far wall. The visor was cracked, and inside it I saw fingerprints, pressed from the inside. That was when I realized it didn't just kill him. It kept him. There's a kind of quiet that only happens after people die. It's not silence. It's absence. A hollowing of the air that leaves your ears ringing and your stomach empty. That's what it felt like when Ruth was gone. I don't know how long I stood there in that hallway staring at his helmet. Time had stopped meaning anything. The emergency lights had died, leaving only the faint green glow of my wrist beacon. It painted everything in a sickly underwater haze. The corridor stretched ahead, swallowed by darkness. Somewhere deep within it, water dripped in slow, steady beats. The sound became my anchor proof that something in this place still obeyed natural law. I moved, not because I wanted to, but because staying still meant joining the dead. Every few steps, I glanced behind me, half expecting to see Ruth following, half afraid that I would. The air changed as I went deeper. It grew warmer, thicker, carrying a smell I can still taste when I wake at night. Copper, decay, ozone. The scent of something that shouldn't exist but does anyway. The walls here were slick, almost soft, beneath my gloves. When my light hit them, I realized why the tiles had been replaced by something organic. Flesh fused with concrete veins pulsing faintly under the surface. It ran the length of the hall like the building itself was alive. At the end of the corridor was another hatch, half open, leading downward. The steps disappeared into black. A faint vibration rose from below, rhythmic and wet, like a pulse. I should have turned back, but there was nowhere else to go. I descended. Each step sank slightly under my weight. The sound reminded me of walking through mud. The deeper I went, the louder the pulse became until it wasn't a sound anymore. It was a feeling inside my chest, syncing with my heartbeat. When I reached the bottom, I found myself in a vast underground chamber. The ceiling vanished into darkness, and the floor was coated in a thin layer of water that shimmered under the faint glow of failing lights. Something about the geometry felt wrong. The walls curved in ways they shouldn't, angles folding back into themselves. And in the center of the room stood what I thought was machinery. At least that's what I wanted to believe. It was tall, maybe 15 feet, and built of metal and flesh fused together. Cables hung from the ceiling like umbilical cords, feeding into the thing's surface. It pulsed in time with the low, steady rhythm that filled the air. As I got closer, I saw shapes moving within it. Human shapes. Faces pressed against translucent tissue mouths, open in silent screams, eyes rolling beneath thin membranes. Their bodies were half absorbed, half alive, suspended in the machinery, like insects trapped in amber. Some still wore pieces of uniform, police patches, tactical harnesses. The missing officers, the rest of Phantom Echo. The hum grew louder. The floor began to vibrate. Then slowly, the mass shifted, peeling itself away from the cables with a wet snap. It turned toward me, and I realized it wasn't a machine. It was breathing. Something moved beneath its surface, pushing outward, shaping the form of a face that wasn't human anymore. When it spoke, it didn't use a voice. The sound came from inside my skull. We learn, we build, we remember. My rifle was shaking in my hands. I aimed, fired burst after burst, each round vanishing into its surface like shooting into water. The bullets disappeared, leaving ripples that spread across its flesh. It took a step forward. The ground beneath me shifted, softening veins spreading out from its base like roots. They crawled toward my boots, curling around my ankles. I fired again, screaming, pulling back, until my shoulder hit the wall. The veins stopped just short of my feet, quivering as if deciding. Then came the sound, a chorus of voices, hundreds of them, whispering together in broken unity. They weren't words I understood, but they crawled under my skin, like insects. Join. I stumbled backward, grabbed a loose pipe from the floor, and swung it through the nearest vein. The moment it struck, the entire chamber reacted. The lights flickered to life all at once, blinding white. The walls convulsed. Every face within that living mass screamed in perfect unison, the sound sharp enough to rattle my teeth. I turned and ran. The path behind me was changing, twisting, reshaping itself. The walls flexed like muscles. I could feel it moving inside the structure, whatever it was. It wasn't just one thing anymore. As I reached the ladder, something hit the ground behind me with a wet, heavy thud. I didn't look back. I climbed faster than I ever had in my life, lungs burning, ears filled with the sound of that heartbeat following me up the shaft. When I reached the hatch, I slammed it shut and locked it, pressing my weight against it until the vibration stopped. For a moment, there was silence. Then faintly through the metal, I heard a voice I recognized. Ruth's voice. "It's okay," it said. "You're one of us now." When I woke up, the lights were back. Not the flickering fluorescence from before. These were harsh, white, surgical. My head ached, my vision doubled, and for a few seconds, I thought maybe I'd finally died. Then I heard boots, heavy, synchronized, deliberate. I blinked until my eyes focused. Figures in black armor filled the hallway, faceless, each wearing a matte mask with no visor, only a smooth surface with a small grid of vents over the mouth. No markings, no insignias. One of them stood above me. He didn't speak at first, just stared down at me through that blank helmet. When he finally did, his voice came through a modulator, flat and steady. "Identify yourself." I tried, but my throat was dry. "Spectre 1. Phantom Echo." He paused, then turned slightly, as if listening to someone else on a comms line. When he looked back, his tone had changed. "You were never here." He grabbed my vest with one hand and lifted me like I weighed nothing. His grip wasn't human. I could feel the strength through the armor, mechanical, efficient. They moved past me in formation, silent, except for the low hum of their gear. Two broke off and entered the chamber behind the hatch I'd sealed. A third carried something that looked like a compact flamethrower, its nozzle pulsing faint blue light. The air filled with a hiss, then the smell of burning meat. I turned away. Didn't matter that I'd seen worse, this was different. This was intentional. They weren't rescuing anyone, they were erasing. When they came back up, They carried sealed black bags, too many to count. Some of them still twitched. The one who had lifted me before gestured down the hall. Move. I followed. My legs didn't want to, but something in his voice told me I didn't have a choice. We passed what was left of the upper levels. Everywhere we went, they burned. Rooms where my team had fallen were sterilized with precision walls, scraped blood evaporated by chemical flame. They didn't speak to each other. They didn't even look at the bodies. At the main entrance, I saw one of them standing beside a portable rig, humming with energy. A blade extended from it, vibrating faster than the eye could track. He used it to cut through a hanging form one of my men strung from the rafters. The motion was smooth, clinical. Another operative caught the falling remains in a black mesh sheet, sealing it with a chemical hiss. No emotion, no acknowledgement, just procedure. I tried to speak. What? What was it? The leader stopped, turned slightly toward me. For a moment, I thought he might answer. Instead, he reached into a pouch on his vest and pulled out a black envelope. No writing, no seal. He shoved it into my chest. For you. Then he stepped back and raised his hand. The rest of the squad moved out instantly, fanning through the corridor like smoke dissolving into air. Within seconds, they were gone. No sound of vehicles, no footsteps, just silence again. I stood there for a long time before I opened the envelope. Inside was a single photograph, grainy black and white. It showed a figure half shrouded by a surgical draped limbs stretched across an operating table with no restraints. At first it looked human. Then I saw the arms too long, the fingers jointed in ways that weren't natural. On the back, written in block capitals, were 3 words: containment, protocol, marionette. And beneath it, a phone number. That was all. I never saw the Black Ops team again. When I made it topside, there were trucks waiting, government issue, unmarked. They took me to a debriefing center I didn't recognize, kept me in isolation for days. When I finally saw my handler again, Monarch, she didn't even blink. There was no mission, she said. Your unit is listed as killed in a training exercise in Arizona. You've been on medical leave for 2 weeks. I tried to argue, but she only tilted her head slightly and clicked through something on her monitor. Her tone never changed. You were never deployed. Phantom Echo does not exist. Then she looked right at me and smiled. You should go home now. They discharged me within the hour. No appeal, no record. The medals, the clearances, even my service number gone. When I got back to my apartment, the black envelope was waiting on my bed. The same photo, same number. No one had been inside. I don't sleep much anymore. When I do, it's never for long. Every time my eyes close, I'm back in that basement, the smell of metal, the hum of the lights, Ruth's voice whispering from behind the door. For a while, I tried to convince myself it was trauma, that my mind had broken trying to explain what I saw. But then the phone rang. It was 3:17 in the morning, an unlisted number. I almost didn't answer. When I did, no one spoke, only static. Then faintly beneath it, something breathing. I hung up. The call came again, and again, always at the same time. Always that sound, like someone standing too close to the receiver, exhaling slowly, waiting for me to speak first. The photo from the envelope sits on my desk now. I've tried to burn it, tear it, even soak it in bleach. It never changes. The paper doesn't burn. The image doesn't fade. Sometimes when I look at it too long, the figure seems closer, clearer, like it's still moving. A few days ago, I called the number on the back. I don't know why. Maybe I was tired of being afraid. It rang once before someone picked up. No greeting, no voice. Just a faint hum, like a generator running deep underground. Then a voice spoke, flat modulated the same tone as the man in black armor. You've been monitored. I tried to ask who they were, what happened at the doghouse. All I heard in response was containment requires control. You were contaminated but stable. You survived exposure. Then silence. I thought the line had died until I heard one more sentence quieter this time. You shouldn't have come back up. The call disconnected. That night, the lights in my apartment flickered for the first time since I moved in. My reflection in the window blinked a half second too late. Now I hear things through the walls. Not voices exactly, but movement. Wet, dragging sounds. Sometimes it's behind me when I'm half asleep close enough to make the floorboards shift. I started sleeping with a gun again. Old habits die hard. But the worst part isn't the sounds. It's the feeling. Every so often, when I wake in the dark, there's a pulse under my skin, faint, rhythmic, just below the surface. Like something trying to remember how to beat. Yesterday, a letter arrived. No return address. Inside was a single sheet of paper, blank, except for a single line typed in the center. We learn, we build, we remember. And underneath it, in handwriting, I recognized as Ruth's join. I dropped it, but when I turned away, I could swear I heard someone whisper my name. Not from the letter, from inside my own head. I think it's spreading. I think whatever was down there never really died. Maybe it never could. Sometimes I wonder if the others were lucky, if dying there in that basement was cleaner than whatever this is. Because I can still feel it, in my blood, in the back of my skull, waiting. When I look at my reflection now, there's a shadow behind me. It moves when I don't. It breathes when I hold my breath. I don't think it's watching me anymore. I think it's learning. And every night at 3:17, the phone rings again. I don't answer anymore. Because deep down, I know what will happen when I do. The voice on the other end won't be a stranger's. It'll be my own. If you've made it this far, thank you for listening. But maybe you should have stopped when he told you to. Because some stories don't end when the recording stops. They stay with you. In the silence. In the static. In the spaces between your own heartbeats. Phantom Echo was erased from all records. The official report said, training accident equipment, failure, no survivors. But someone kept calling at 3:17 a.m. And now, maybe they're calling you too. If your phone rings tonight, don't pick it up. And whatever you do, don't answer if the voice on the other end sounds like your own. This has been NightLore. Sleep well.